Hey everyone, this video covers the new Annular Equinox event, which is the final event in the 4th anniversary in DFFOO global version of the game. And in this video, I'll be giving a quick overview about my approach on the 1st to 4th contact, as well as a video recording of the run themselves. I will also be including a timestamp in the video description so you can use those to jump ahead to the specific run or video that you are interested in. As far as the Annularity stage, which is the only Lufenia Plus stage on this event, I have a separate video for that, and I will also include a link to that in the video description, so do check it out if you are interested. Specifically, also, all my runs on this event are going to be no boss turn runs. So if you are particularly interested in that kind of strategy, then do watch on to see how I spread my units and the approaches that I take. Alright, so starting out on the first event, which is the Annular Equinox First Contact, and this is a regular Lufenia difficulty stage. This event features a rerun of the previously infamous Medusa bosses, and they can be quite tricky to deal with because they can actually remove all their debuffs as well as become immune to all forms of delay, including delay from bricks certain times during the fight. So this makes it particularly challenging for no boss turn runs. The approach that I took here is to really just use Sidmal, which is Sid Reigns and Afmal, as well as Bards to handle this stage. I was actually trying to save this party comp for one of the later stages, but a lot of the stages here are either immune to launch or features heavy damage reduction during launch. So this is really one of the only stages that the bosses are actually not immune to launch and do not actually reduce launch damage. So Sid Malbards it is right on this stage. Very quickly, the orb does require you to either lose HP from the boss's attack, which you don't want because this is a no boss turn run, or to lose HP from a player ability, and it will only plus 8. So to achieve that, I gave Sid Reigns a Liud LD call. I believe other than Liud, a VV LD call should also provide the HP loss. The actual call effects doesn't matter. The only purpose for that call ability is to actually uptick the Lufenia orb. You will have a lot of leeway because the orb only appears at 49%, and when you do the LD call, the orb will have a massive +8, which is really more than enough with this party setup to complete the fight before the orb expires. So the strategy here is pretty straightforward. You just want to ramp up Bards to 3 stacks of his burst aura, and you can turn manipulate Bards in order to achieve that fairly quickly. And then you just want to then alternate turns between Sid Reigns and Afmal and launch the bosses to Oblivion. Later on in the fight, when the Lufenia orb appears and when the orb count gets low, you just use the Liud LD call to uptick the orb again and continue your launch onslaught. And then at the end of the fight, when the bosses are low enough, you can just swap Afma out for another Sid Reigns, pop summon, and double Sid Reigns the boss to death. In terms of the other call abilities, I set Kate Sith on Bards. If you don't have Kate Sith, an Iroha call, LD call should work as well. And then I set a Kai's LD call on Afmal, mainly for the Brave League debuff. If you don't have Kai's, you can maybe just set like a Sephiroth LD call for the gold frame debuff. The thing to note though is that the bosses will cleanse the Kai's debuff twice during the fight, so the approach that I take is hold off on using Kai's until the bosses hit 79%, which is when they will first cleanse their debuffs, and then use one of the Kai's call, and then hold off the other remaining call for when the bosses cleanse their debuffs a second time when they hit 49%. So this ensures you have the Brave League debuff up majority of the fight. Coming to the second contact, this is the fight with the Needle Snake. And the tricky thing about the Needle Snake is if they have 4 or more debuffs, they will able to use Shed Plus, which is also a trigger attack, so there's no way to avoid Shed Plus. Shed Plus actually removes all the Needle Snake's debuffs, and later on they will also combine this with Covered in Sharp Spines, which sort of batteries themselves automatically to max brave every time they get broken for 3 times. So it starts with a stack of 3. Each time you break them, it will reduce the stack by 1, but they will regen their brave to full again. So which means you need to break them 3 times before they get their turn, or at least have some sort of brace freeze effect in play, such as Setzer's Freeze Joker, Kater's LD debuff, or maybe even Golbez's Burst Aura, which will prevent them from regening their brave. You can also inflict the bosses with Yuffie's No Cheating debuff. However, do note that the bosses will cleanse all debuffs including that debuff, so it may not be very effective. The Lufenia Orb makes this significantly more challenging because the orb actually requires you to inflict at least 4 debuffs on the bosses. If you have 4 debuffs, then every turn will +2 the orb, so that isn't an issue. But this actually forces you to inflict 4 debuffs, which will then trigger Shed Plus during certain points in the fight. So that's very difficult to avoid, and which also means that the bosses will sooner or later cleanse all their debuffs, and you need to think about reapplying debuffs on the bosses. So the no boss turn strategy here that I take is to use Quistis to just delay the bosses to oblivion. So Quistis is the queen of delay, and she can really delay the bosses very easily, and I actually think she's one of the better units to consider in any of these fights in this event, mainly because you can just spam her S2, which is an instant turn rate at the start, and delay both bosses, and then when she's out of skills you can just swap her out for a friend support unit. I use her here mainly because I actually plan to use Setzer on this event, mainly to hopefully use his Freeze Joker to freeze the boss's brave. I ended up actually not using Setzer's Freeze Joker, but the other reason why I brought in Setzer is the bosses will cleanse their debuffs and they become very tanky when their Sharp Spines are up. So Setzer's main function is to actually buff everyone with rainbow damage, which sort of bypasses the boss's heavy defenses. And finally, I have Cloud of Darkness as my main DPS unit. You don't really have to use Cloud of Darkness, technically any DPS unit should work. And I use Cloud of Darkness mainly because I thought she could help to delay the bosses, but really Quistis is more than enough. And I really didn't have any other stage that I wanted to use Cloud of Darkness in, so this stage it is. Coming to the third contact, this stage features the return of the Aloof Horn and the 2 minions. This stage can be a little bit tricky because right after you take any action at the start, the boss becomes to turn delay while the 2 minions are up, which means that you want to actually kill both minions very quickly so that you can start delaying the boss again, or utilize the party, I guess, who you can either do turn manipulation or do break delays. So there's a few options here, but I mainly use lightning. I think Vayne himself will work very well as well because he has a lot of break delays, and predominantly this stage is actually a single target stage because the minions die very quickly. So to round off the party, what I did is first have Oren with an Abinatalian LD call, and the main reason for that really only is to reset the fight until Oren goes first so that he can use Abinatalian LD call to turn delete at the start, and then I swap him out for a Garnet friend support. Take note also, the boss is immune to all debuffs that prevents actions, so paralysis, confusion or sleep or HP silence are all not going to work. But with lightning here it doesn't matter because she can delay the boss to oblivion. So once I swap Oren out, the idea is then to just launch Kain into the air, and then lightning will go to town with her turn manipulation. I did use lightning's burst mode, but I think on hindsight it may not even be needed. Just going through her usual rotations and using all of her 4 LDs should be enough to bring the boss low enough, after which you can finish the boss off inside summon mode. Finally, on the Annular Equinox 4th contact, this stage also featured a boss which was quite infamous in the past, which is the Count Steams, where they get very aggressive with HP attacks when they build up steam. There was also one stage in the past where they could counter attack melee attacks, but this isn't the case this time as far as I can see. The other thing difficult about this fight is that at certain points in the fight, they will actually cleanse all their debuffs, which is readying a powerful attack. You can't avoid this trigger, and on top of removing all their debuffs, they also become immune to new debuffs, which means that you can't have reapply any debuffs or anything like that, and the debuff immunity will stay until they get a turn and use multi-slash plus. So this means that in a no boss turn run, you just can't rely on any debuffs at all. However, to make things a bit more difficult, the orb starts at 79% and the orb requires you to deal holy elemental weakness damage, but the bosses aren't actually weak to the holy element naturally, which means you actually need to apply the holy imperil, which can't happen if they are immune to debuffs. So I think the idea behind this fight is that you need to quickly let them use multi-slash plus and then reapply the holy imperil. The approach that I took here is to just simply overpower the bosses, and that is why I kept my Garnet and Machina combo for this very stage. And it gets very simple. It's just setting up Machina so that he gets his burst aura and then go into a burst mode. With the Garnet support, his burst mode will fully kill both bosses very easily. They don't actually have a lot of HP. I use Kais here to round up the party because Kais will buff Machina with hero support. I was actually initially trying to use Selfie, but I realized Selfie's Rapture won't work when the bosses become immune to debuffs because her launch is debuff based, whereas Kais is buff based, so Kais will actually work. The rest of the party, the rest of the core abilities, is just making use of core abilities that don't rely on debuffs. So that's where the Iroha and Kid Sith call comes in, and I set the Elise call on Machina just for that LD call aura when he goes into burst mode. There is quite a lot of flexibility here because Machina's burst is really an overkill on this fight, and as soon as you can start his burst mode with his burst aura up, the boss is essentially dead.
罠から俺は本気だよ。必殺冒険はまだ終わらない。やろうぜ。ここだ。ごめんな。当たれ。この勝負もらった。目にも止まらなくてね。受け取りな。
協力してね。とっておきだ。
さあ行こう。全ての力を持って
なんだって
助け合いだ。
頼りにしてるから任せておけよなんだって
助け合いだ。
諦めないんだから。
光を切り開いてみせよう。
助け合いだ。
まだまだやっちゃえ。縁も竹縄が面白くなってきたの。あーしまい。
助け合いだ。
待っていて。さあ行こう。全ての力を持って
なんだって
助け合いだ。
頼りにしてるから任せておけよな。
助け合いだ。
待っていて。
なんだって
助け合いだ。空中から
頼りにしてるから任せておけよな。
助け合いだ。
待っていて。
心の赴くままに空を飾る。
光を切り開いてみせよう。
助け合いだ。
諦めないんだから。
さあ行こう。手術では終わらない。
なんだって
助け合いだ。
健闘を祈ろう。気を抜くな。 さあ行こう。全ての力を持って呪縛を待っていて。
助け合いだ。
そこだ。さあ行こう。全ての力を持って呪縛を待っていたよ。
助け合いだ。
そこだ。さあ行こう。全ての力を持って呪縛を待っていて。
助け合いだ。
そこだ。さあ行こう。待っていたよ。
助け合いだ。
そこだ。さあ行こう。全ての力を持って呪縛を待っていたよ。
助け合いだ。
そこだ。
助け合いだ。
待っていたよ。そこだ。私の奴隷ではない。
レディーゴー。ガンガン行くっすよ。もう一丁。シュート。
賭けに出る。イカ様なしだ。決めるぜ。
逃がさぬ。
隙は与えない。
行け。無に返すとしよう。さあ、これがわしとの差だ。消え去れ。
いえ。
口よ。
残念。
口よ。
残念。
口よ。逃がさぬ。口よ。
決めれば。はあ、この光です。
口よ。
打ち砕こう。
口よ。
残念。
口よ。
残念。
口よ。逃がさぬ。口よ。
みんながいてくれたら負けないわ。祈りを届け。私にできることを。力を。もう諦めないの。
口よ。
おとなしくして。
口よ。逃がさぬ。口よ。 しません。口よ。口よ。
イカサマなしだ。決めるぜ。
口よ。
ここからです。力を貸してください。迷わないと決めたの。
口よ。返す時まで。口よ。返す時が来た。口よ。返す時が来た。口よ。返す時が来た。口よ。逃がさぬ。行け。無に返すとしよう。それ。これがわしとの差だ。消え去れ。口よ。
イカサマなしだ。決めるぜ。
口よ。
力を貸してください。迷わないと決めたの。
口よ。返す時が来た。口よ。口よ。
助かったわ。残念。
口よ。
残念。
口よ。
静まりなさい。
口よ。返す時が来た。口よ。暗闇に飲まれるがよい。意志です。
これで最後だ。じゃあ
みんながいてくれたら負けないわ。おとなしくして。祈りを届け。私にできることを。力を。もう諦めないの。 は与えない。受けろ。焼き付けろ。
終わらせてやる。
シェア駆け抜ける。ドロー研ぎ澄ます。絶対レードの一撃。飛翔する。明動せよ。
この距離なら。
明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
焼き付けろ。
明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
受けろ。
明動せよ。
切り裂く。おりゃ
明動せよ。
終わりだ。スナック先行。刻み込め。轟け。運命を断つ。悪い。
明動せよ。
受けろ。
明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
切り裂く。おりゃみんなのためにも。
任せておけ。明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
受けろ。
明動せよ。
焼き付けろ。
明動せよ。
受けろ。
明動せよ。
力を貸してください。迷わないと決めたの。
明動せよ。
切り裂く。そりゃ
明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
焼き付けろ。
明動せよ。 明動せよ。
切り裂く。そりゃあ
明動せよ。
受けろ。
明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
焼き付けろ。
明動せよ。
切り裂く。そりゃあ
明動せよ。
蹴散らす。
明動せよ。
受けろ。悪くない勝ち方だ。
遅い。終わりだ。はっ。
この距離なら。
ここだ。決めるぞ。みんな力を貸してくれ。もらった。負けられないんだ。
みんなよろしゅう。そわ
おとなしくして。祈りを届け。私にできることを。力を。もう諦めないの。
空中貫け。いいタイミングだ。
みんなのためにも。負ける気はないわよ。
こっからマジだ。
お願い。
今だ。
届け。力を貸してください。迷わないと決めた。
チャチャチャチャンス。
一気に決める。
これから本番。覚悟はいい？
ビビんなよ。
必殺。
ボカーン。さあガンガン行くとすっか。
いただき。ここからです。
こんなん出ました。どうぞ。
おとなしくして。
もう倒れてくれ。
みんなのためにもチャンス到来。
もう倒れてくれ。
みんなのためにもチャンス到来。
もう倒れてくれ。
みんなのためにも
チャチャチャチャンス。
ここだ。決めるぞ。みんな力を貸してくれ。負けられないんだ。もっと強く。